there, welcome back. Today is a What the Hell Is This? And the What the Hell Is This is Raise The Titanic and Meteor. Two mega bombs from the late 70s, early 80s that absolutely demolished the studios because they made so little money and they get so criticised, and they were like old school films trying to be disaster movies. And it's I like both of them, but they're both pretty terrible. We'll start with Meteor. Meteor was the first one out. Now, Meteor is a film I've not seen. It's one of those films I always meant to watch and never had a chance to see. I only seen it recently, and it was the far end of the disaster movie era, where you'd had Poseidon Adventure, which was directed by Ronald Neame, who also directed this. You had like Earthquake. You'd had all these big disaster movies, that had delivered. Tower Inferno, just a bunch of big movies. A lot of them directed by like British directors, just making blockbusters. And they'd come and gone, and they get into the airport movies, and one of the airport movies director ended up doing Raise the Titanic. And that run its course as well, because it was like there's only so much you do with an airplane being in trouble. And then you got the far end stuff, like you had Beyond the Poseidon Adventure, which is a film I've seen lots of times as a kid. You just swarm. That was another Michael Caine film for Robin Allen. It was a disaster. There was Avalanche, where Robert Shaw died halfway through production. It was just like, at this point, the films were starting to collapse into disasters. And people were getting bored with them. They'd seen the gimmick. Like, there's only so many times you can look at a disaster and say, I wonder what's going to happen next. I mean, they'd had the big budget films, like Poseidon Adventure, like Earthquake. Like, you were seeing things you wouldn't have seen on TV. And it was like, okay, we've seen this. Now Star Wars is out, and Star Wars and Jaws and things like that are now the next big thing. So people moved away into space, and they were still making these disaster movies, and it was like, well, no one cares anymore. So Meteor decided to bring together space and disaster movies, and spy movies, and a Russian-US metaphor for how we should work together. But it forgot to include special effects. So basically Samuel Arkoff, who is a big exploitation producer, helped finance this one. And he got Ronald Neame involved and Sean Connery, and they went through a few different writers because they didn't like the original scripts, and they ended up with Stanley Mann, who had done a few big films and would go on to do a couple other really bad films like Conan Destroyer and Firestarter and stuff like that. This was a writer who was about to hit his really fallow period, and so he wrote a draft they all liked and decided to make the film. As they cast it, Natalie Wood as interpreter, the Brian Keith, an American actor as a Russian who needed to be interpreted, who'd actually just been with Sean Connery in One the Lion. Very good actor, but as a Russian, he's so obviously American, it's embarrassing. But he gives the best performance in the film. Even though he's hamming it up like crazy, it's still entertaining. Now, both these films are bad films. And both these films I'd happily rewatch. And then in case of Meteor, it's fun for Connery's fun in a fairly mediocre role, but he's really trying to keep the film afloat. Brian Keith is hamming up like a lunatic. You have a lot of supporting characters who are terrible and who you want to see die. And some of them die. And you've got some of the worst special effects in the world. But it's funny how this film pretty much set up the what would be any attacking meteor film pretty much as this film. I mean, Armageddon is very similar to this film, except you go with people to blow up the meteor, but everything else is kind of the same. It's just this one did it really boringly. Because basically they realise, okay, a meteor's coming towards Earth, it's huge, it will kill us if we don't actually stop it. Well, what can we do? So basically, Sean Connery plays this guy who had built this security system for this purpose. If someone come to Earth, you'd have nuclear weapons aimed at space, and you just fire them and blow it up. No problems. He'd worked out all the communications issues as well, so that they were ready to go. So that it was just a case of aim. So he'd done all that. And it was based on Project Icarus, which was the NASA version of that. But then he found out they turned the weapons around to aim at Russia, so he quit his job. So 5 years later, or was it 2 years, I can't remember. The details are pretty hard to get hold of here. He has pulled off he's become a guy who does boat races. He's pulled off a race to come to NASA straight away because the meteor's coming to Earth and they have to destroy it. So they have to find a way to aim, to tell the people in the White House to aim the rockets up into space instead of down to Earth to save everyone's life. That's 40 minutes of the film, them trying to convince everybody, like setting it up and convincing everybody that, hey, maybe we should turn these around. And they've tried to deal with stupid characters who don't want to do that. That's the start of the film's problem. It's like, just turn it around and admit you've got these things, because they won't admit they've got these things. And the Russians have their own version, they won't admit they've got it either. And that first half of the film is all about that, but especially the first 40 minutes will try to convince these guys to turn it around. So Cal Malden, as the head of NASA, try to help him and Connery. They don't have much to work with, but they do their best to make sure these stuff's entertaining. Dealing with stupidity. Martin Landau playing out the most moronic person in the full film, who doesn't want to turn the rockets around or admit they're there. And it's like, it's good that Landau's getting work, but it's like, you're giving him an impossible position because the character's a complete moron. The Henry Fonda playing the president, again, just after, I mean, he did it in Failsafe, where he nuked New York. He plays it in this film, where New York gets crushed by a meteor. He's not a good actor to put as president. Things are going to go wrong, especially for New York. But also, he's very frail in this film. You can tell he's old. And you have scenes of him having to walk around, and it's like, don't make him walk. Just don't make him walk. He's obviously not feeling well. It's that kind of thing. It's like, oh God, you've offered this actor a lot of money for this film, and he looks really ill. So I don't think he lived much longer. He did on Golden Pond, but apart from that, I think this was towards the end. It was definitely towards the end of his career, and he looks ill. So there's that element, and he's trying to go through scenes that are utterly moronic. Now, he does not have one scene that is credible as drama. Henry Fonda needs terrible scenes, which makes it fun to watch. This film is full of scenes that are fun to watch for all the wrong reasons. Then we have the romance between Connery and Natalie Wood, who plays the person who's interpreted for Brian Keith. Well, Brian Keith is pretty much hamming it up through the entire film. She's interpreting for him. And it's only an excuse for give Connery a love interest, and as they talk to each other. And it's good they don't give Connery a young strumpet as a love interest. They give him someone in his own age. But you can tell Natalie Wood is not really into this film. But she's trying to do a professional job, but it's fairly obvious that she's doing her best, but she's not getting much to work with. The idea the character's interested in someone who is interested in space, and the best way to do it is to actually be an interpreter for this Russian scientist who's very, very good at his job. But it's not really well written. The highlight of her character is she buys a scarf. Yeah, I'm sure she thought this is an Oscar-winning role. But her and Connery have decent chemistry together. They seem to enjoy each other's presence in the film. And Connery and Brian Keith obviously like working together. So even though it's not the most brilliantly written scenes, those three together tend to keep the film afloat. And Cal Malden wandering around as well. But it's always all those scenes take place in a bunker. Well, things are happening around the world. So it means you feel you're in a set for most of the film and you're not really... There's no actual drama. It's just a bunch of scenes people talk. It could be a TV movie. And then, amidst that, there's lots of special effects that are terrible. So basically you've got a TV movie set up, you've got overpaid actors in a set, and you've got terrible special effects destroying the world. How can you go wrong? So with the special effects, right, here's the story. The first, the Arkhov made cheapo films, so they had the special effects people. They weren't happy with the special effects people. They get fired. A new special effects bunch of people were brought in to do effects. They get fired, and then the last people were brought in to do a rush job, which means effects look terrible. I mean, there's stuff in this film where to light models, you have to light a model so that it'll be matted into another background, and the model in the background have to be lit so that they can match up to give a sensation of both depth and they're in the same space. These models are shot to look like models. They look like something you buy for a kid. They're lit very flatly so you can just see all the lines, the cut lines, so there's no sense of scale or anything. A lot of models, you're meant to shoot them very slowly and speed up the film to give a sense of weight. That doesn't feel like it's happening. The Meteor looks like it's a cutout, even though it's not. You tell it's a model that's been cut out very carefully to do the thing. It's been lit so badly, you just feel the cutout feels very flat. So the basic techniques of doing this are done badly. And this is a year before Empire Strikes Back. So there's no excuse. Empire Strikes Back did something so much more complicated than this film a year later. So you can't say, oh, it was the time. It wasn't the time. Another film did this stuff better. But basically should have delayed the film and got the effects right. Instead of some effects where things are flooded, you've got avalanches and things, and they all just look like two different plates put together, and nothing matches up, and it's like, this looks like the first attempt at something, and we'll say, how do we fix this? Does not look like a finished thing at all. And it's brilliant. It's hilariously bad. I was having so much fun watching these bad effects. The bad effects mixed with the lackluster plotting of this one room that takes place most of the film. Oh, it's wonderful. There's because there's some Asian finance, and you need a scene where Hong Kong gets trashed by a tidal wave caused by a bit of the asteroid breaking off. Which they always do in these movies. As soon as an asteroid's coming to the Earth, or meteor or whatever, some of the little fragments come and hit Earth before they blow it up, so that you have some special effects sequences. So there's one bit where it hits Hong Kong, and you've got all these shots of Hong Kong in the 70s, which is great to look at because I like Hong Kong stuff shot in the 70s. And it's just getting trashed. And it's just like, where's Mighty Peking Man? The best bit though is the avalanche sequence where you've got these skiers, they're on an avalanche, and then the avalanche, a bit of meteor hits it, the avalanche collapses on them. They have to try and run away from all the snow that doesn't look like it's in the same shot. And there's a bit of a skier who has to out-ski an avalanche and fails, and it's like, oh my god, this is so sad. This is just so sad. And then most of the characters are taken away, who you've just met, and they're taken away in stretchers, including a young Sybil Danning. And then after that, is the best bit though, is they say, here's some footage shot of a skiing race that was going on an hour before this hit. All these people died. And you've got this massive line of of skiers that are, it's like a marathon, and they're saying this as if it's a, serious thing, and it's just hilarious. Finally, as they set up the defense system to defend themselves against this meteor, New York is hit by a fragment, destroys all of the place the colony's at, and they have to try and escape from that place up to the surface while the rockets go off to save them, because Connie's already worked it out beforehand. So that's why you have Sean Connery in the film. He can press the button at the right time. Even under duress of a meteor storm hitting New York, and he's in New York, he'll still press the button at the right time and wait for the right time to do it. And it's like, couldn't you just have set it up with electronics? You've already set it up, you've already done all that stuff. It's like, why you press the button seem important? But we need a countdown. So you've got a disaster movie element for 20 minutes. They have to try and escape this one area. One guy who they've set up as a expert gets his legs crushed, so they have to try and drag him out. Then he drowns as the water escapes from the River Hudson, and he drowns. He's like, poor guy, you should just crushed him earlier and get it over with. There's a sympathetic woman character who's been sympathetic through the whole film, and she's brutally crushed as soon as the meteor hits, and it's meant to be moving, but it's just funny. The whole film's like that. The whole film was just like misjudged moment after misjudged moment. So eventually they blow up the meteor. The plan that Connie had from the start works. Russian and American forces have combined to save the world. Blah, blah, blah. It was a blast. It was terrible but wonderful. I highly recommend it for bad movie watching. This is I would definitely say have some booze with you to help you get through some of the dialogue scenes. But as soon as Brian Keith shows up, there's going to be some real scenery chewing moments. Like, he could have just chewed the scenery to get them out of the location at the end. I mean, that was probably the easy way to do it. So, that's Meteor. Meteor was a blast for all the wrong reasons. Raise the Titanic was the next one up that bombed horribly. This was the end of the disaster movie, pretty much. This one was a death knell. It's not even a disaster movie. Like Meteor, they have to have a Russian versus American thing going on. They try to do a defense system, kind of like the one in Meteor, but different, because it's to do with find this power source that will create a defense umbrella, something like the Star Wars situation that Reagan tried to put in the 80s. But this rare fuel was on the Titanic when it sunk, which it takes you a good 20-30 minutes to figure this information out through the film. This thing is on the Titanic, so they have to try and raise the Titanic, because Titanic's so far down they can't put drivers in to try and get it out. So they have to raise the Titanic. And this film was made before they discovered Titanic, and they thought it was all still as one. So they all thought they could just raise the ship rather than it's in pieces. So that's dated the film. But I have to say, even after we found the Titanic, I've watched this film quite a few times after that, and I didn't care about the science. So the whole point of this film is the first half is a spy movie, and the second half is basically Raise the Titanic. But it's a very bad spy movie. It's a terrible, anemic spy movie with terrible, terrible writing. You can't blame any of the actors for this one. The actors are doing their best, but if Jason Robards been boring, that's really hard to do. That's impossible with most films. He tends to, even in the worst films, he can use the pull off a performance and be great. Making him boring is really difficult. This film pulls it off. You've got Richard Jordan as a lead. And he's one of those actors that never got any luck. He was always a decent actor who... He was never a movie star, but he was always someone good to have and support, and he's always good to be in a film. He's always a nice person to see in a film in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s before he died. He's the lead character. He's meant to be this suave character who is an adventurer. But they don't give him any dialogue to suggest that. He's just like this guy who does stuff for the government. And Jordan's doing his best, but he's not given much to do. He's kind of cynical. And it's one of those ones that's like, I like the actor, pity about the script. You had David Selby as the other guy, the scientist guy, who him and Jordan bond through the film. He's kind of nondescript. He's described as a character as nondescript early on, that kind of boring guy, and the actor has nothing else to work with. You have Anna Archer in the early part coming in and playing the girlfriend, which should later on play the wife and have some Ford Patriot games, Jack Ryan movies. She never get any luck in big movies. She just always get that boring part, and it was like, that's a shame. She seemed to have more potential than this stuff. Maybe saw like Shortcuts. She actually is good in that. It's like she never really got the parts in the big movies. So this film is basically first half of the movie find this information that you know leads to Titanic. So it's a spy movie where the results are foregone conclusion. It's like you're doing a lot of running around to tell us something we already know, which doesn't help the film in any way. It should just have said, like, it's on the Titanic. Let's raise it. But that wouldn't be a film, because as soon as they get to Titanic, it's just a case of attaching these things to it, and that's like 10 minutes of film. But with lots of underwater scenes of all these models, these expensive models, which are far better looking than Meteor, but they're still obviously models. They have not figured out to make these models look good. So it's like one of those ones that's like, you spent a lot of money and you should have hired ILM. But they were doing Star Wars at the time and Empire Strikes Back. But they needed someone to really do the models. But they needed someone to do the script, to be honest. The script just meanders. There's a nice scene with Alec Guinness and Richard Jordan in a pub, you know, early on. That's the best part of the film. It's like, just leave them in the pub for a good half hour. And you'll save a lot of money in this film, and we'll have much more fun in the film. You know, cause it's like, that's the best part of the film by a mile. But now you have to do this spy stuff that's really tedious. And you probably notice I'm not describing much from this section of the film, beyond the fact it's Russians versus Americans hunting this thing down, because nothing actually happens that's interesting. It's like you're watching scenes from other films been repeated in this film. You know, there's a scene in the ice, there's a scene in a mine, there's a scene here, there's a scene there. They're jumping, they're going through the globe trying to find things, and the only time it ever gets interesting is Alec Guinness shows up. And then finally, the second half, they're going to do the underwater stuff. That, I don't know what it looked like then, but now it looks terrible. But enjoyably retro. So I enjoy watching a lot of old models. I'm happy doing that. But I don't know what a modern viewer could possibly think seeing this film, because it's aged badly for the models, and the idea of it is not great, and the idea of the Titanic being in one place is obviously not right. So it's got so much going against it that I think only people can really watch this one are people of a certain age who saw it a lot on TV, because it was repeated a lot on TV in the 80s. Mainly because Lou Grade, who financed it, was trying to make his money back because it was such a disaster. So, yeah, this one's a stinker, but it's wonderful. It's wonderfully trashy and awful, because you've got the sequence at the end where they raise the Titanic. They have to set up this whole suspense thing where a ship is trapped near the Titanic. They have to raise it early to get them out of the problem area. You know, which they don't need. It's just like there's nothing else happening. It's just there's lots of ships going around the Titanic and attacking stuff. It's like, we need something to happen, but you don't buy the drama. They set up all this stuff for the drama, and it's like, I don't care. I don't like the characters. I don't care. But I like the models. I like the little ships doing things. But the Titanic Erased is really well done, even though it's obviously a model. Because John Barry did the score for this film, and the score is the best part of the film by a mile. And the Erasing the Titanic sequence is good. And the bit where they go on the boat and they actually walking around the boat, it's wonderful, very haunting. The whole boat looks just rotted. It's just, and they end up pulling it into New York later on in this film, and it looks gorgeous too. So there's lots of lovely sequences. It's pure fantasy now because we know the reality, but it's nice to see it done in the film, and that's probably why the film lasts for certain people like me. It's those little moments when it raises, or the moments when it goes into New York, that really work. But it's just that 90% of the film doesn't work. It's basically the Titanic stuff when it's raised and then it's getting to New York, all the stuff with Al Guinness. Even some scenes they try to do on the Titanic with the Russians later on don't work at all. There's a whole bunch of plots that don't work in this film. I mean, you will be bored. You will be thinking, what's going on? I have no idea why they put this into production when they didn't really have a script that was worth a damn. And they didn't have a director who knew what he was doing, because the direction is so boring in this film. Basically, the only time the film looks good is when the model makers are in charge of Raise the Titanic, or they're the ones the people who shot it, even though they probably didn't have the right money for it. That's the only time it really works. And when the production design's good, but the actual direction is very TV-like, so it's not that good. But it is an example of what happens when someone. This is both times. Both these films are made by individuals who got foreign financing for different territories to make this film, and the film's bombed horribly because they wanted to make the films because they thought there was a market for them, and there was no market for them, and they had a lot of big actors or medium actors. Like special effects would keep it going. They were trying to make films from the 60s, essentially. They were trying to do spy movies from the 60s. In the late 1970s, when it was a different era. They tried to do films that no one wanted anymore. So it was just like, it's too little too late. Because you were hiring people to do a kind of film that no one wanted to see. And it was obviously absurd. And you weren't hiring good people to do it. You were hiring the people who you could afford. Or people who never quite understood what the job was, or in the case of Meteor, it was a case of director had the wrong idea and the terrible special effects. So both these films I would happily rewatch because they're hooked, but they're not good. But if you like that kind of late 70s trashy disaster movie that doesn't work, these are good fun. Just especially Meteor. Meteor's a lot of fun because it's clueless. It's legitimately clueless. Raise the Titanic has a better highs, legitimate highs, but it's also much more boring. But Meteor is ridiculous. So hope you enjoyed this video. I'm not going to go any longer with this one. So that's us. I'll see you later.